run a church, for example, and in my church, the culture is for me to preach standing on top of people's backs. Example, just an example.
So what up, guys? Welcome back. My name is Luke, and yes, welcome back to Primal Spirit Distillery. We're back at it again at the table talk, and I'm joined by...
Hey guys, it's Chris.
Hey guys, it's Jonathan.
Hey guys, it's Benedicte.
So yes, guys, you're welcome. Bro, once more again, we're back at it.
Yeah, man.
And yeah. So what's up today?
Yeah, we will be speaking about power dynamics, but then we're looking at it from an institutional point of view, right? With institutional setups, there is always like a hierarchy that exists. You know who's in charge, who does what, and we want to see and break down what causes there to be sort of like disruptions in this, and why is it what causes it for people to be like power hungry and stuff like that. So we're gonna look at a video, and then we can just discuss the points around that.
Yeah. So the video was sort of like a trigger for this whole topic. Then I'm like, well, this is a good place to start, because I mean, I've seen that there is always that some form of inclination for, an institution to turn tyrannical at some point. It starts off very well with a good vision.
Yeah.
But as it goes along, of course, yes, because human beings, of course, always have the tendency to somehow adjust themselves within an hierarchy, like you stated, and they have that tendency to choose like a leader amongst everyone, and somehow that turns into a tyrannical structure. So we wanted to look at that and how that starts and pinpoints like, different institutions that. Yeah. Let's watch the video.
Wow. Okay.
Next man of God.
Somebody else? Somebody else?
Okay, yes.
Hefty, huh?
So what do you guys have to say, no?
Grand entrance.
Yeah.
That's a grand entrance. There is no question who's in power in that situation.
True.
Okay? He makes it very clear from the moment he steps out of the car, sits on his seat, and then those guys pick him up and take him into the building. It's very clear who he is, and already there are elements of that I find a bit shady. The fact that, he's so revered that his feet can't touch the ground. Like,
I mean, even presidents don't do that.
But do you think he's deliberate in doing that? Because before he even arrived, the chair was already waiting for him. So it could be that it's the people that are, let's call them the followers, that have decided, no, our father shouldn't walk since we have hands to carry him. So the moment he steps out of the car, this is how we want to honor him, or this is how we want to show him that we respect or love him. So it might not be him per se, but the people around him that feel like he needs to be treated the way that he's being treated.
I mean, well, we could say the people, but then I think we also need to consider that in as much as you've got people who might look at you, give you that, should I say, that type of honor and lift you up that much, you still have a mind of your own. You can still tell them that this is not something I agree with.
People are resilient.
So, but you could still resist it. You
People are
don't
very
necessarily
resilient.
need to bow to what they've set for you as, yeah.
No, I think he enabled them to do that. Even if it's their own thinking and even if it's something that they thought of, he planted, in my view, he planted a seed in their heads where that's okay for them to do something like that. Okay? Like, especially when it comes to power. Power for me, in my mind, is absolute. Right? So you can't say that you're in a position of power and, well, that's just how I think of it, basically, is that if I'm in power, then I am the absolute power. Like, everybody else can have smaller degrees of power relative to me, but I'm the authority figure. And as a way of enforcing my power, there are certain things that come with that. There are certain privileges that come with that. For one, if this is like a setup where you've got seating or whatever, he might get the best seats in the house. Who knows, right? If it's a money thing, he gets more money than everybody else. If he's already set that example, or he's cultured that kind of mindset in the people that I'm the reference, okay, then it would not be abnormal for people to think that if I want to please him, if I want to be on his good side, seeing that he's a person in power, I'd be tempted to do one or two things that make him seem even bigger than he is.
True.
But that's the thing. What I'm trying to say is, nobody can be told how to love or how to respect or how to show, all these, how to honor somebody. He is not necessary. He might not have instilled that in them in maybe his teaching or his way of living. People are people. People just wake up one morning and they decide this is how we want to run the show. And
No.
it's possible. It's very possible.
Think about it, Benedicte. You can. People tend to imitate. It goes back to what Chris is talking about. Even if I don't say it, explicitly, implicitly it is so. Like, think about ethos, right? Every institution has an ethos. By ethos, I mean that unconscious way of behaving or way of acting. Go to any institution and just stand and analyze people. You will see that everyone obeys a certain rule without being told.
It's the culture.
That's the ethos, yes. That's the culture of that very place. You don't need to be told, to say, okay, you should behave in this way, act in this way, but this man implicitly suggests so.
That's the thing. I'm only responsible for what I say, not for what you understand. So if I'm speaking this or I'm acting this and you understand the opposite, it's not my fault, it's on you. You see, it's on you. I will maybe, because we've only watched one video. We don't know what goes down in that church or whatever it is. We don't know. So we can't conclude and say, no, in his way of teaching, in his way of, behaving, he has empowered them to treat him the way that they're treating him. There's a possibility that it's just the people who have, maybe he even went against it. He told them not to treat. It's possible. No. It's very possible.
No. Like,
it's very
if
possible.
he did really go against it, he would have said no when they presented the chair.
It's very possible. What I'm saying here is it's very possible.
Okay, it's very possible. But regardless, as I stated, this was just a trigger. Because as we've seen with every institution nowadays, okay, I don't want to touch on the whole aspect of church or whatever. But we've seen it has gone to that extent. Now, this is just what can I say? A mini representation of the overall picture. Yes. So now, going back to what Jonathan said, it is your responsibility as a leader to tell your followers, no, don't do this. No, don't do this. This man was happy. Look at that. He was smiling.
And and that's a very good point. I like the point that you made, right? It's your responsibility. I mean, as much as you say something, how the next person interprets it is entirely up to them.
Exactly.
But this statement cannot be more applicable, especially when it comes to a situation of power, because in that, right, in that situation, as a person in power, you must understand the influence that you have on people. Okay, the influence that you have is not only reflected in how you act, but in the things you say as well. If you're a person of power and you're saying something, you must understand that it can be interpreted in many ways based off who you are. If I say an apple is red today, right, everyone's going to be like, an apple is red. But if I was the president and I'm saying an apple is red, it almost becomes gospel. Now you have no choice but to say an apple is red, based off the fact that I'm the one in power saying that. So I could have hinted to you that I want special treatment, and then you're like, oh, he needs special treatment, and then boom, here comes the chair, here comes the entourage, here comes all these fancy things, whatever it is. Because that man didn't look like he was complaining. I'm sorry,
That man was not complaining.
Nah.
He was happy. And this is not the first time I'm seeing someone being lifted off the chair. There's another video of this man preaching on top of a chair. And people are carrying him around.
I've seen homies standing on dudes' backs and doing backflips and crazy things, and it tells you that the power dynamic is so messed up that there's widespread abuse of power, right? Not only in a religious setup, but then in many different social setups, in the home, relationships, whatever it is.
Okay, I think let's not jump into calling it abuse of power, because earlier on, I don't know, one of you guys mentioned a culture.
Yeah.
Like every institution has its culture.
True.
So we can't come here and stand to say that no, let's say for example, I run a church, for example, and in my church the culture is for me to preach standing on top of people's backs. Example, just an example. Okay. And the people who are in the church are okay with it. They are completely fine.
Okay.
So every time I'm about to preach, they just come there and they lay down and I go on top of them and I preach. That is the culture of the church. It's not against them. So you can't call it abuse. What is abuse? It's me taking advantage of you. You know, I am taking advantage of you. You haven't consented to me doing a certain thing to you. So that is when it's called abuse. But if it's our culture and you walk in and we explain to you that, hey, listen, here, you need to lay down for me to preach on top of you. And you say, yes, I agree. How am I abusing
that's not
you?
abuse.
I'm not abusing you.
I mean,
You've agreed.
Wouldn't it
that's
still
true.
be abuse, like from a psychological level?
No,
Because
I didn't coerce you into agreeing. I explained to you, it's A, B, C, D. Are you in or out? No, I'm in. You are in.
yes,
Okay,
but
fine. Then
you
do
need
this.
to look at this, right? Because when we're speaking of abuse, right, it's not something that always happens automatically. It's not just, quick. Sometimes it might be something that is built up through time, as I think Patrick or Chris mentioned it, that, ideas are being brought up. It's not just expressed explicitly, but probably implicitly as well. So, say for example, it's something he's been doing, toying on the emotions of the people time over time, and eventually they've learned to accept it. It's not as though, he suggested it and they were just like, okay, here we go. Maybe he hinted it bit by bit, and eventually, he suggested it and they received it and they began to act out of it.
If you're leaning into it from that perspective, then it's something completely different. Because
So you
I'm talking
wouldn't call
about
it
culture.
abuse?
I'm talking about culture.
Culture can be built through abuse as well.
No, I
You
don't.
can
I
build culture
disagree
through
with
abuse.
that. I disagree with that.
I agree with him.
I
You can
disagree with
actually
that.
build a culture
Through abuse. How
This is
so?
why I'll back this up by looking at the basic construct of civilization, right? If you look at how you get passing of culture from one civilization to another, best example, colonialism, right? How did we adopt Western civilization? The colonizer wasn't like, hey guys, this is how we do things. Are you?
It wasn't
in or
a
out?
suggestion.
In or you're out.
It wasn't a suggestion.
It was
Think
like-
about it.
It was quite literally enforced on a lot of people, right? Like, this is how we're gonna do things from now on. You're in, and they're like, oh, we're in. Like, yeah, you're in. And that's just how it is. And from that, you see a whole culture being brought up. So it's possible. Like, you can get culture that is based on an abusive relationship, an abuse of power even as it stands. Not to like completely discredit your point. Who knows? That could have been the culture at the church,
Exactly.
right? Where everyone is so submissive that they feel that in this man, because we hold him in such high regard, we will do all sorts of things for him. But my drawback on that is, if you feel at any point that you need to give someone so much reverence that it takes away your dignity, for me, I raise a red flag and I say that is abuse of power.
But that's the thing. Dignity is relative.
Dignity is relative.
Yes, it's very relative. Just, how do I put this? What you may regard as something that dignifies a person isn't necessarily what I will regard as something that dignifies a person. True. So if making myself a carpet for my preacher to preach does not seem as something that does not dignify me, I'll do it. So then I can't lean into the point that you're making of saying that if it doesn't dignify me to honor this person one way or another, then I shouldn't, you see. So if we're looking at it like that, now people see things differently. So we will never always agree on everything. So now we're finding ourselves in a position where I think it's okay for me to do that. And I will go that extra mile. Maybe it's not even an extra mile for me. It's normal, it's natural. He deserves it. He does so much for me, so let me do it for him. There are women who serve their husbands and they kneel down and they stay there until he finishes to eat. Then they stand up and they go. That's how they do it. It's not abuse. That's just how it is. So yeah.
No, that's a bit much to take in, because I'm trying to find a perspective from which we can call that abuse. Is it from a humanitarian perspective? Think about it, because from the outside we know that's abuse.
We think it's abuse.
Yeah, we think it's abuse.
No, but Chris, no, guys, think about it. No, but think about it. Think about it. Think about it. Let's go back to our colonialism took place, right? And how we were whipped, right, to accept certain cultures that were not ours, right? As an outsider, would you call that abuse or not abuse?
If you were neutral, you'd be like, it isn't. Why? Because, okay, for example, if you were neutral and then you're looking at it from the side of the enforcer, right? The enforcer wants work or labor, and he needs to quite literally drive these people to work fast because they have a deadline. I'd be like, hey, I'd probably whip them too to make them work faster. Yeah. If you're looking at it from the side of the person who's having those laws enforced on them, you'd be like, I don't really want to work for you. I feel like you should pay me, and I'm not with that whole whipping thing. So from the outside looking in, you can choose to look at it however you want, basically.
But don't you think that also undermines a lot of abusive situations? Because if we say it's subjective, it undermines a lot of abusive situations. That means there's no need for me to intervene in a lot of abusive situations. If we say it's subjective, think about it.
But if we're looking at an abusive situation, the only person who can call it abusive is the person in that situation.
Now it becomes a problem. That's what I'm trying to state. It becomes a problem because if we look at the whole abuse, and begin to say it's very much subjective. It depends on the person who's within that abusive situation. Then that becomes a problem. We even go down to morality now. Yeah, now we can go down to morality. Is it wrong or right on a moral stand ground? Then someone else might say morality is subjective. It's relative. Then it becomes a serious issue. So personally, I still stand on that. Regardless of whether the person likes it or not, I know the person has been worked on psychologically. Because no man can stand on you and preach or just walk on you the whole time like that physically. No.
These guys are heavy, bro. The guys that are being stood on, bruv, not even 60 kgs, I'm estimating. But that's beside the point.
They say love is sacrificial.
Love is sacrificial.
To what extent? Who are you to mention what extent love is sacrificial?
Bro, think about it. Guys, coming back, okay, let's not even talk from the physical part of things, financially, some people take their whole entire finances and give to institution and enrich a certain leader who they perceive to be the ideal individual that they want to become. And they deprive their families. You know? You see, that's a problem, regardless of whether it's subjective or not. Because over time, this leads to issues, societal issues. Think about it. So I wouldn't really consider this as a thing of, as long as a person within the situation is fine with it, it's cool. No, it's not. Because at the ultimate end, it's more like a domino effect.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to the whole thing of abuse of power, and in this case, if you look at the financial aspect with large institutions, it's something that's becoming commonplace, right?
Yeah.
If you look at especially the religious construct, it's something that is commonplace. There's a term called megachurches right now, you know what I'm saying? Like, whereby the way in which they do things is you're working with the masses, okay? And with these masses of people, you want to give them an idea of hope or whatever it is in exchange for motivation to give back. Pat might be onto something there, because many times, especially when I've seen cases where people were interviewed, right? They'd come there with a problem, okay? And then their problem wasn't really solved, but they were still encouraged to contribute financially. They go back. That trip itself cost them. It might have deprived them of something, whatever it is. And then when they'd be asked if they thought that thing was beneficial, the answer would always be yes. Already for me, that is a bit weird, because how can, from a human level, you think that's okay? I think it begs the question, what is the psyche of people that are in these institutions that have that kind of power over you? How is their mental health?
I have a problem with you saying people have power over people. But what I wanted to say, firstly, is that times have changed, right? So as the years go by, literally everything changes. The way people did things 25 years ago isn't the way people do things now. So with regards to financial aid in institutions, it changes as well. I mean, it's just like everything else, things are changing. If back then people weren't going to take out all their savings to give to the church, it's happening now. And who's to say it's the wrong thing to do? You know, who's to call that wrong? Because every person has a mind. Every person has a brain. Every person has that one thing that fuels them, regardless of what people are saying around them.
True.
So if you can go beyond what people are saying around you and you still go take your savings and you give it to the church, then you must have been convinced that this is the right thing for me to do at this exact moment. So we can't really.
So we really can't blame the leaders.
No, not necessarily, honestly.
But what do you think is the underlying problem? Would you still consider it as a problem, looking at the whole thing from a moral standpoint of view? Would you still consider that act of someone just depriving themselves of, finances, a good thing or not?
Jonathan, what would you say to that?
I mean, I would say it's not a good thing. And I think I would still take it back to the leaders because I feel as though these people have got a sincere devotion to something and the leaders tend to prey on that devotion. So it's, say, for example, they believe that their devotion is to God, for example, right? Okay. And they feel as though when I take this money, I'm giving, all my finances to God. And the leaders tend to prey on that because in as much as we could say that it's not, everybody's got a mind, I'm one who believes that the way we think and how we look at things has been shaped by something. And I think we should not ignore that. If we're going to move forward, we should not ignore that, certain things have been shaped by what we've been taking in. And these people have got a mind, true, but what has that mind been shaped by? What have they been fed?
The ethos of that place.
Yes.
And who is responsible for creating the ethos?
The leader.
Thank you. So guys, I mean, I wanted to touch on this because it also brought to mind, I told you to read on that massacre that took place in Uganda, where I believe it was 900 plus individuals burnt themselves by as instructed by the leader who told them that the world is going to end in the year 2000. These individuals, 900 people, burnt themselves in a church because they believed it's going to be, the end of the world the following day.
Did the leader burn himself as well?
They killed themselves as well.
Wow. Okay.
Right? So they believed that it was all, end of the world. And guess what? It's 22 years later and we're still here. So now I wanted to look into that because I feel like with regards to power, right? I don't know, there's that tendency of institution to lean on to cultish tendencies. I don't know if you guys have seen that. Like, in as much as we don't declare and claim that we are a cult, there's the minute the leader becomes power hungry, we lean on to that. Because think about it, it's abuse, right? They're being abused, right? Walked on, right? All right, they're being walked on. Let's go back to that because it makes sense.
They're being abused, they're being walked on.
Oh yes, okay, they're not being abused. Okay,
Yeah,
okay. So they're being walked on. The minute I give an opposing opinion with regards to that, I become the enemy. Already, that's one of the elements of cults. They don't accept outside opinions with regards to their practices.
Yeah, on the point of whereby institutions become cult-like, it is not only applicable in a religious setting. You can have groups that are built on different fundamentals that tend to become cult-like.
Yes.
A classic example is multi-level marketing. I'm sure you guys have heard of that, right?
No.
Okay, to simplify it, it is whereby we sell you a product, right? But then the business model is whereby we need to recruit more people into the business. I'm gonna bring two guys, they bring their two, and we have a structure that helps to sell the product.
Kind of like a pyramid.
Kind of like a pyramid scheme. We're not going to say pyramid scheme because if you say that, they get touched. So kind of like that. But even those kind of institutions, they become cult-like where you can't speak to an individual from there unless you're speaking about what they're speaking about, right? You can remove it from business to a family setup. Have you guys come across families where you've got someone that's very rich or someone that's like earning more than everyone else, and that person is like a cult hero in that family almost, like they're revered in a certain way. People talk about them in a certain way, they treat them in a certain way. And for me, all it just says is it's simple power dynamics, right? It works in whatever setting you put it. The power dynamics are going to show up. Even if you're going to look at the 900 people that burnt themselves, the leader must have had so much influence that these people were quite literally willing to burn themselves. For me, it's power dynamics, and it shows up way more than we want it to. Like, it's showing up all over in many spheres, not just religious. I mean, that one was kind of crazy, but
It was crazy.
Okay, what I want to say, your diction, cult-like, how do I put this? I'm going back to culture, right?
Okay.
I'm going back to culture.
Okay.
We have traditions, right? We have different ethnicities and all that. And the reason culture exists is to differentiate one group from another, right? So you will find people who belong to a particular tradition who will not let the people from a different tradition to to dictate how they live their lives. So that doesn't make them cult-like. It's just them following culture. There's been a culture that was set. There's been a culture that they live by. There's been a culture that they've been following from the time that they were born. And they can't just let anyone come in and change it, you see. So if we're looking at institutions, specifically religious institutions, leaning into becoming cult-like, I think it brings us back to the whole culture thing. It's something, culture, first, for culture to be adopted, it takes time. It takes a lot of time for culture to be established and adopted. And once it has been, if I was a leader, I wouldn't accept any leader to just come in and say, no, don't do this, don't do that. But that doesn't mean that I want to turn this into a cult. It's just that I know how hard I fought to get this culture going. So why are you coming all of a sudden? You want to change the culture.
And that's a great point.
That's a good point.
The root word is cult, right? Cult. Culture. I'm sure they derive from the same kind of thing.
Let's not assume
that because I don't know any better. But
yeah.
I would like to think that it's no coincidence that cults have a certain focus and emphasis on culture. It's the culture that they put in there, right or wrong, okay? There's a culture that they follow. With the guys that burnt themselves, their culture was one of sacrifice. They believed in sacrifice so much that their lives were meaningless. And for me, if you had to ask me a question and say, do you think based off that these guys were in a cult? Yes, that was a cult.
Okay, I think I understand you. I actually understand you. And you make a good point. It's actually a good point because, when it comes to culture, culture is different. And people tend to, of course, look at their cultures very much different. But the problem is, right, from what perspective are we saying this is wrong or right? Supposedly, I'm taking a religious standpoint of view of morality. I see people in an institution being whipped for coming late, right? Everyone receives like 300 strokes. Like,
that's extreme.
I'm just saying, like serious strokes. Now, from a religious standpoint of view, that's abuse, right?
Is it also abuse from an educational standpoint? No, that sometimes happens in different schools. You're late in school, they whip you. So is that also abuse?
It's abuse. That's why it's discouraged in school.
It depends on the context in that case, right?
Yeah.
It does depend on the context.
They're just trying to teach you something. You don't want to get whooped, so tomorrow you're going to wake up early to get to school on time.
But 300 strokes, guys, for getting late. No, that's abuse.
Tough love.
Love, I love. I still, regardless of how subjective it is, personally, I'll still say it's very much an abusive type of environment where you as an individual, somehow and some way, are encouraged to deprive yourself of certain things, your dignity, your respect, your finances. For me, that's abuse.
What do you say, Benedicte?
I'm still trying to wrap my head around everything. So.
No, but for me, especially when you look at the whole thing of culture, and again, we're going to go back to that point you made because it was an excellent point. Culture takes time to adopt, right? You don't just start something today and then tomorrow it catches on. It needs quite a little bit of time. It needs momentum. You need to rest assured that if you, as the originator of that culture, were to die or something, there'd be continuity. It was going to continue, right? Can we then say that there is a wrong way to bring about the continuation of culture? Like what Patrick said, what if I'm the guy that started this whole school disciplinary system and then I started with simple punishments, right? Like go stand in the naughty corner or kneel down or whatever, right? And then the next guy takes it to an extreme and he's like, no, now you're going to stand in the naughty corner and we're going to punch you while you're in the naughty corner. And then the next guy is like, no,
I'm going to punch and kick you.
5 people are going to punch you in the naughty corner. And then it gets... So if we're going on that angle of establishing culture, I think that's a dangerous
Something
angle.
went wrong somewhere. I think that brings us back to what I said earlier of I'm only responsible for what I say, not for what you understand. Because I mean, I'm not there anymore. I'm not there anymore. I maybe said that when you're late, we're gonna slap you, just one slap, so that next time you're not late. But I'm not there, and this is hundreds of years after my passing, and over all these years, there've been different people who feel. Who look at corporal punishment in a different way, from a different perspective. Maybe they feel a slap is not
Enough.
Doesn't get in. It deserves to be a punch.
Needs to
And
be
then
knifed.
5 punches. Yeah, you see. So you can't really blame me, who was the leader, who introduced this whole corporal punishment thing. So it now becomes the issue of the people who had been listening to me. Now the question, the issue now will be how people listen, how well people listen when lessons are being taught or when culture is being established. How well do people listen to their leaders? And if they do they really listen to the leader? Do they really follow word for word what the person is saying? You see.
Jonathan?
That could be quite tricky as well, because in as much as because I think that will now depend on the intentions of the leader, and we then need to know that not every leader has got good intentions in whatsoever they might have introduced. So that's why I say it's tricky, because how then do you know that it's not the leader who introduced the culture that's being practiced among the people? Because as you say, culture takes time to develop, right? So you need to introduce an idea. People need to accept it. So this idea is being developed within the minds of the people for some time, right? And the question then comes back again: what is the intention of this idea that's been presented? Like, what was the leader's intentions for presenting that idea?
And if I can add on to that, with intentions or with saying what you want to say, you must remove any sort of ambiguity.
True.
Here's the thing about, or what I've noticed in some institutions, is that people will say things and it'll be an open-ended statement. And that is dangerous, because now it's open to interpretation. I can understand it however I want to understand it. You can understand however you want to understand it. If my intentions are to do something, let me say it in a way that everybody understands. Exactly
Leaves no room for misinterpretation.
It must not leave room for interpretation.
Misinterpretation.
For misinterpretation. Thank you.
But that's the thing. Not everything that is misunderstood is ambiguous. I'll give an example of the Bible, for example. It's written, it's clear. It's very clear. And we still have people who will come and tell you something that is not even there. You read, you're like, but when I'm reading, I'm getting this. But the other person's like, no, this is what God was trying to say. Now you're telling me what God was trying to say. You get my point. So it's just the issue is the person who is listening, or the person who is studying, or the person who is learning this thing that wants to give to other people. If they are ambiguous themselves, automatically they will misunderstand. So I may speak frankly, but you misunderstand me, and it's not on me, it's on you.
But that's the thing with the example you just gave right now, right, with the Bible and so on. I think we need to come back again. It does still have to do with the leader, because there were people who had other intentions. Remember, I mentioned culture has, as you said, right, culture is developed over time. And I mentioned that it's an idea that's presented, and that idea is developed among the people, with time. And that's the same with the Bible. It might not be ambiguous as such, but who are some of the people that started presenting the ideas of it, and twisting it, which has developed the minds of the people today? And as you said, when you have a certain culture that's built among people, it becomes hard to, remove that culture, because people are like, who are you to come and tell us to think any different? Because that's what they're comfortable with. That's what they've learned since they were young. It becomes very hard to, to remove it from them.
You remember I said culture is mostly adopted as a result of observation. Remember, when you walk into a certain institution, people don't need to tell you this is how we behave. You already see it.
True.
And you see it by means of who is punished and who's rewarded. Just by observation, okay, this one did that and look, he's rewarded by the leader. And this one did that and look, he's punished by means of observation. So I believe it's less words
True.
and more observation. So that means it's the leader's responsibility, because if we look at this man and we put him as an ideal thing to be, or an ideal human being to be, right? We tend to be more observant of this man instead of listening to what he's saying. More action, less words. And I feel like the Bible is more prone to be misunderstood because there are less people to demonstrate it, and there are a lot of people to speak it. Yeah. Because we've not seen Jesus really. Yeah. So I personally don't know how Jesus behaves, but I would really appreciate it if someone really demonstrated and illustrated somehow, the way of life, the way Jesus behaved. You get it? Yeah, I get so hence it's more prone to be misinterpreted, and I feel it's the same for institutions. The leader's words doesn't really carry weight. The way in which he acts carries so much weight. Because human beings, we tend to be more observant than we don't really. Yes.
The system.
Listen. Yes.
That's what I understand from
it.
There needs to be a system that is set up that speaks for itself.
Yes.
Quite basically.
Yes. And who sets up the system?
Who sets up the system?
That's the thing.
The leader.
The leader.
And who reinforces the system?
The
people.
Exactly. So does that kind of clear the air on why that guy was being carried into the case?
I don't think we'll ever know why.
No, but I still understand it.
I think it's it's not obvious, but based off everything we've said here, it's clear that there's a culture that exists there. There's a setup.
Yes.
All right. There's a system that's already in place.
Yes.
And we know who is at the head of that system.
Yes.
And everybody is just acting accordingly.
Yes.
It means that it's commonplace for them to do that for anyone who visits. Because I don't know, we can't say that person is a leader or something. Yes. He could be a guest for all we know.
Maybe, true. I didn't think of that. I didn't think of that.
Yeah.
No, maybe their culture is one of hospitality. You might go there and walk out.
Welcome you like
that's
that.
how you get welcomed.
I don't
know. No,
yes,
I didn't think of that.
Sense.
I didn't think of that. I really didn't think of that.
But it just goes to show that already that's their culture, and maybe they might be actually comfortable with it. I think that's where we can find common ground. Like I was saying, no abuse of power, but common ground between us could be like, okay, that's what they think is fine, and that's what they're used to, so let it be.
I think that's why it's difficult, right? To like discourage people from certain things, certain institutions and certain things. Because for them, it's right. What makes it wrong? I'm feeling a pain in my heart that I've sacrificed a lot of money, but regardless, it's for the goodness of the kingdom.
I mean, another example I can give to just support what you're saying is you will see a woman who's in a very abusive relationship, and it's clear that she's being abused emotionally, physically, mentally, everythally she's being abused, but she's not leaving. She's not leaving. Why is she not leaving? And it's not like she doesn't speak about these things. She speaks about it, and she'll cry, and she realizes how tough this guy is on her, but she's still there. Why are you still there? So there's that one thing that always keeps people in that space. I don't know, maybe hope that things will get better.
Thank you.
Maybe.
I lighted hope. It's hope.
It's the hope that kills you, isn't it?
Yeah.